Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. Today, I would like to talk about success. Is it about avoiding regret, achieving a goal, or something else? And this came up for me because I saw a quote by Toni Morrison saying, "For me, success is not a public thing, it's a private thing. It's when you have fewer and fewer regrets." And I have a pretty strong reaction to that. Sara, kick us off. What do you think?
I would love to first offer a definition because I think definition of success is so subjective to every individual. The measurement of success is so personal, and yet talking about public and private, I think with these days we are trying to live up to somebody else's standards and definition of success all the time, even though it means just like one-sided story. And last week, I think it was, or earlier this week, I loved your conversation about work-life balance, because when we're trying to achieve success, from my own personal experience, oftentimes it throws us off balance because we're just focusing on this one thing and one thing only. And by the time you get there, you're like, wait, this is not what I actually expected. This is not what I actually wanted. And then open as a bag of regrets.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting reading this because I do believe, I viewed it more personal as opposed to public. It is really success and should be defined by you, an individual. I may think Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback because he's won 7 Super Bowls, and for all we know, he defines success that he should have won 10. So just because that's how I may view it publicly, how they view it, privately. I did think Toni Morrison's quote was interesting because I don't think I ever really felt it that way, but as you live life longer and you get to the point where you have fewer and fewer regrets, it made me think about the process of, has your life become more successful because you have fewer regrets? Obviously, if you ended life with a lot more regrets, maybe things hadn't worked out so well. But it did pose an interesting observation, and I do, I guess from a personal standpoint, did like where I agree with the private aspect versus more so the public.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. I do think it's more of a, because you could look at it from the public side, from the outside, and think, oh, Tom Brady probably feels successful because he has been successful in his career, but he himself might define success as the fact that he's been a good husband, he's raised good kids, or I don't know Tom Brady's life at all, but that could be success for him. The part of the quote that I felt I struggled with is the separation of regret. For me, I find myself, I feel I'm successful in my career, and I've had to make sacrifices with relationships and things in order to become successful in my career. And I do regret some of those decisions, but I still feel successful, and I love what I do, and I'm happy. So I don't think you necessarily have to separate regret from success, because think of any kind of an athlete. They've had to make sacrifices, and I'm sure there are moments where they still are proud of themselves for what they've accomplished, but they still wish they could have gone to the parties that they missed while they were training. They could have had the relationships that they had to sacrifice because they were focused on their goal. I think it's okay. I think you can have regrets and success and have them together.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Brendan. I know for me, when I first read it, I really had a strong visceral response to success has nothing to do with regret. Like, for me, I don't have regrets. Do I have a lot of chaos in my life? Have I lived through a lot of things? Yes, absolutely. Do I regret any of them? No, because they brought me to where I am today. So I'm not sure what regret has to do with success. I feel like they're two really different things.
Would it be possible if just your emotional intelligence to be credited with the fact that you know how to take the losses, you know how to take the fumbles and tumbles, and instead of dwelling on them and seeing them as a regret, like, oh, a stepping stone, oh, something to fire me up, something to actually get up and move on and try again. Not everybody, I think, has that.
Also, maybe it's about the definition of what regret means that I'm struggling with.
Possibly. I guess I look at it, and Brandon, his comments about life and business, they are decisions that are made, and you have to be comfortable with the outcome, knowing that it may be a situation where I regret doing that. I took a job once where I was commuting for, very long distance for 2 years and regretted the fact that I couldn't see my kids as much from an athletic standpoint and wanted to enjoy that. So, I felt it helped from a career standpoint, but, it's lost time that you don't get back. So, I can appreciate the regret piece. When you first ask the question about, how do you define success? Regret doesn't come to the top. It's like, well, I define success this way.
Right.
But, in reading her statement and kind of how it applies to the question, I can certainly appreciate it that as you've gotten older, you've kind of, maybe the regrets just fall away because you're not as concerned about them anymore. And so therefore, I'm satisfied with the success I've achieved, and this is the path that I've taken. So,
I guess thinking about it, it would make sense to redefine success, defining regrets, because to me, when I think about a regret, it's something I wish I had done. Whereas when I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of success, I wish I could have built better relationships along the way on a personal standpoint, but I don't wish I had done that over my career. So I don't know if that would be considered a regret more so than a wish I could have.
Yeah, because I agree with that. Like the idea that success is a goal, maybe not a place you work to, but a place you work from. Like, this is where I want to get, so I'm working from that point of view. And the decisions you make along the way to reach that, is that regret, or are those just choices? And maybe to your point, Sara, it's about the emotional intelligence of being able to make that distinction about choices versus regret.
And another thing that I try to live up to all the time is, as a former elite athlete, to the eyes of the outsider, I was successful. I never felt that way until that chapter was closed, and looking back, it's like, oh yeah, maybe. But now I try to put myself in a space where success is something that I embody, no matter of what's going on around me. It's like state of being. Because I have found that making decisions, making moves, and just exuding that energy, it creates a whole different narrative and a whole different reality to begin with. And a lot of things become easy, even things that are challenging, decisions that are impossible to a degree. And like, oh, from this standpoint, I can simply make this sacrifice. I can simply say no to this and yes to that. So maybe just something to ponder on.
What do you guys think? Is it a matter of just age? Is it, and I don't know how old the woman who made the quote was. I don't know her age and if she means regret in that way. But I did bring it up specifically because I felt very strongly that I was like, no, that is not a definition of success.
Yeah, I guess I go back to what I had said earlier in terms of from a timing standpoint, and maybe there is an age relative aspect to that. As you go through life, for me, it's, kids are grown and getting married and kind of gone and kind of gone off on my own as a business person. The regrets aspect, I guess, become really less and less because you're kind of getting towards the end, and it doesn't really matter, quite honestly. You are where you are, so to speak. And it does come back to, though, the very not private, but personal aspect of how do you define success? And whether you'd want to define it by fewer regrets, or define it by goals hit, or define it by relationships, or however, that ultimately is really your decision for how you want to define it. She has decided to do it this way, but for other people, regrets may not really be a big part of it. But I can certainly appreciate where she's coming from. But I guess that's where I have kind of seen it.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's a thing of, as you get older, you let go of regrets. So the things that happened, you start to realize, oh, those were choices, or those were decisions, or those can't be undone. So you let go of them, and that's successful.
Immediately thinking of it from the opposite standpoint of, as you get older, like I've been very career driven. As I get older, what if I start to have the regrets of, oh, this career hasn't been it was satisfying then, but now I want all these other things and I don't have them. Will I then fall into that regret and now no longer feel successful because of that?
Well, then I guess you just reframe the whole narrative, and you're like, okay, this part of my life, I lived it. It's what I wanted. Now I'm going to redefine it and renegotiate the terms with myself We do it all the time because we're changing, we're evolving, we're growing. Things get reprioritized all the time.
I'm still struggling with the idea of success being regret. So I'm going to have to think about that some more. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I look forward to doing it again real soon.